Why do stories affect us so deeply? Why can one person's experience change the way we see our own life? Why can hearing about someone healing suddenly make healing feel possible for us too? Now, this is not just emotion, this is neuroscience. Because the human brain is wired for stories. Long before books, before schools, before social media, before modern science, human beings learned through stories. Stories were how knowledge traveled. Stories were how survival lessons were transferred. Stories were how belief systems were created. And even today, your brain still responds to stories more powerfully than information. Now think about this. You can hear a fact and forget it in 5 minutes. But hear a powerful story once and you remember it for years. Why? Because stories bypass resistance. A story does not feel like instruction. It feels like experience. Now imagine someone telling you can heal. Your analytical mind may argue, it may doubt, it may persist. But when you hear the story of someone who suffered deeply, someone who lost hope, someone whose body was trapped in pain, someone who felt broken and somehow transformed. Now, suddenly, your brain becomes quiet because now your nervous system is no longer processing theory. It is processing possibility. Now, this is important because your brain is consistently predicting reality. Your mind looks at your past, your memories, your emotional conditioning, and creates an expectation about the future. If your past has been painful, your brain predicts more pain. If your past has been filled with struggle, your brain predicts struggle. Now, over time, those predictions become beliefs. And those beliefs become identity. Now, this is where stories become powerful. Because a powerful story interrupts prediction. It shows your brain a reality it previously thought was impossible. Now your brain has to reconsider. Now new neural pathways begin to open. Now possibility enters the system. Think about this. If you hear about one person healing, your mind may say, maybe they were lucky. But when you hear story after story of different people with different illness, different backgrounds, different struggles, yet all experiencing transformation, something inside you changes. Now your old belief system weakens. Now possibility becomes believable. Now hope becomes biological. Now this is where healing truly begins. Because no human being heals deeply while emotionally convinced that healing is impossible. Now understand this carefully. The placebo effect itself is proof that belief changes biology. When a person believes something can help them, their body begins responding differently. Chemistry changes, hormones changes, immune response changes, pain perception changes. Now imagine what happens And belief is strengthened emotionally through stories. Now the brain starts rehearsing a new future. Now the body begins responding to a new possibility. Now, this is why stories heal the human brain, because stories change emotional certainty. And emotional certainty changes the body. Now think about your own life. Somewhere in your past, someone told you a story about yourself. Maybe not through words, but through experiences. Life is hard. You are not enough. You cannot trust people. You always get hurt. You cannot heal. You are weak. And slowly, your nervous system memorized those stories. Now, those stories became identity. Now, your body started living them automatically. Now, here is the shift. A new story can begin changing your biology. A new story can begin changing your emotional state. A new story can begin changing your future. Now, this is why transformation stories matter. Not because they entertain us, but because they expand what the brain believes is possible. Now, imagine hearing about someone who had chronic pain for years and suddenly become pain-free, or someone whose nervous system collapsed and later healed completely, or someone whose body was trapped in survival, who learned how to feel alive again. Now, your brain begins asking a new question. If this happened for them, could change also happen for me? And that single question can change a life, because healing often begins not with certainty but with openness, with possibility, with willingness. Now, this is the deeper truth. Human beings do not transform only through information, they transform through emotional experience, and stories create emotional experience. That is why you cry during films. That is why your body reacts during memories. That is why one sentence can stay with you forever, because the brain does not fully separate real experience from emotionally imagined experience. Now, this means a story can become a neurological rehearsal. Now, your brain begins automatically practicing a different reality. Now, your nervous system begins preparing for a different future. Now, this is where identity begins changing, because identity is not just memory. Identity is emotionally repeated memory. Now, if stories can automatically affect memory, they can affect identity too. Now, think about this. Every healing story is really a story about possibility, a story about nervous system change, a story about energy shifting, a story about the body learning something new, and most importantly, a story about someone refusing to remain trapped inside their old self. Now, this chapter is not about miracles, it is about human potential. It is about what happens when people stop emotionally rehearsing suffering and begin emotionally rehearsing transformation. Now, some people will listen with curiosity, some with skepticism, some with hope, but somewhere, someone listening right now will hear one story that changes the way they see themselves forever. And that moment can become the beginning of a completely different life.